This back-to-school season, spend less on your kids with Amazon. Mamas, real talk. Last August, the kids needed matching light-up sneakers. Flashy, pricey, outgrown in weeks. Their back-to-school section serves up deals on crayons, tablets on promo, and yes, budget-friendly glow shoes. Size guides and free returns keep stress low. Doorstop delivery means you're not wrestling carts after work. Stretch that budget and your patience. So remember, with Amazon's low back-to-school prices, just spend less on your kids, because every dollar you don't spend on them is a dollar you haven't spent on them.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. That's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
Need to restock inventory, cover seasonal dips, or manage payroll? OnDeck's small business line of credit provides immediate access to funds up to $100,000 exactly when your business needs it. With flexible draws, transparent pricing, and full control over repayment, you can tackle unexpected expenses without missing a beat. Apply today at OnDeck.com, and funds could be available as soon as tomorrow. Depending on certain loan attributes, your business loan may be issued by OnDeck or Celtic Bank. OnDeck does not lend in North Dakota. All loans and amounts subject to lender approval.
This podcast is sponsored by Hempvana, America's #1 hemp pain relief brand. Have you got the kind of pain that stops you? Stops you from traveling, exercising, picking up your kids or your grandchildren? Hempvana Platinum Pain Relief Cream is here to alleviate the pain so that you can get back to doing the things you love. Target stubborn pain right at the source, wherever it is on your body. Hempvana is perfect for sore joints, arthritis, back and shoulder aches, and more. Hempvana Platinum is FDA listed and proudly made in the USA with 4 times the amount of pure hemp seed oil for fast, targeted pain relief. The non-greasy, odor-free Hempvana cuts through pain, giving you fast-acting relief that's high blood pressure safe, backed by a money-back guarantee. Don't let pain stop you. Fight the pain with Hempvana Platinum.
Hempvana, Hempvana, your body will thank you.
Save up to 20% and get free shipping at Hempvana.com. That's Hempvana.com for up to 20% off, plus free shipping. Hempvana.com.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crime Cast. Jamie and John here with another fantastic case. What's up, buddy?
Dude, not a whole lot. Getting ready for CrimeCon.
Yeah,
That's like next week.
It is. We leave in like 9 days to head out to Denver to meet a lot of listeners, meet a lot of new podcasters, and see some of the biggest names in crime coverage and in crime stories.
If you're going to be there, please shoot us a message. We'd love to connect with you at some point. We've got a lot of swag to give away. So, yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, really excited to meet folks. So make sure if you are coming, we are going to be on Podcast Row. So make sure you come find us.
Yep. Jamie, I want to tell all of our listeners about Patreon. If you have caught up with everything that we've done and you're finding yourself needing a little more, visit patreon.com, patreon.com. Look up True Crime Cast. There you'll have access to almost 8 years worth of exclusive content only available to Patreon members. It's awesome.
And a new one coming out in 5 days. So
yeah, which
exclusive content.
Put that on our to-do list.
Yeah, I also want to give a big thanks to a review that came in, Waddle Woman, who recommended today's case. So that was in a review she wrote over on Apple Podcasts. So it's a great way to suggest cases that we cover. And that's how we found out about this one today.
Waddle Woman? I love it. Or Waddle Woman.
Waddle Woman.
All right.
Waddle.
Well,
Waddle. I mean, it could be both.
Let's waddle on over to this story, man, because this one, dude, I mean, I don't know. Whenever we talk about little kids, you start getting clammed up a little bit, but like mine is when kids are the same age as my kids.
Yeah.
And this one hits that demographic for sure.
Yeah, we're going to go to Spring Hill, Kansas, which is a small, tight-knit Midwestern town in December of 1996. And
what were you doing in 96 around the same time?
Yeah,
I know I was in 6th grade.
I was about the same age as Tawnya at this time. I was about to turn I just turned 14 actually, so I was a little bit younger than her. So I was probably begging for a new Sega Genesis game.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But that night, on December 7th, Tawnya Knight disappeared. She was 15 at the time, and this was, I mean, you talk about the stranger danger, where there were all kinds of people, kids going missing in the 90s, and this was right in the middle of that and really shook this community. It's not just another cold case, though. There's a lot going on, a lot of nuance here, a lot of good conversation to be had around trust, innocence, and really how a community can come together and how things can go, can slip through the cracks that you think wouldn't ever.
So she wasn't just a runaway. I mean, she was not living on the edge of trouble. She was just a typical kid. She was a freshman in high school. She was the kind of teenager whose life revolved around friends, school, and her family. I mean, I feel like I'm describing my kid. I mean,
absolutely
not in trouble, just loves being around friends, hanging out. On the night she vanished, she was just walking home from a friend's house. And this was only a few blocks away. This wasn't like she was walking 5 miles or anything like that. This is something that back then kids just did. I mean, I had friends that lived, I don't know, within like a half-mile radius of each other, and one friend like over a mile away. But back then we rode bikes everywhere. So I would ride my bike to my friend's house. It really didn't matter if it was daytime or nighttime. I mean, this was just small town 1990s. So this was something a lot of kids would do without even thinking twice about it. But this time she didn't make it. So, and that's why this case hits so hard. It's the kind of disappearance that could happen to anybody, but it almost never happened to anybody, right? Like back then, this was just life. You did whatever you wanted. Your parents didn't have a cell phone they could call you on. So yeah, it's just a tragedy that just struck, and it was awful.
It was, and like you said, it was such a different time. I wish my kids could see how we lived as kids, which our current neighborhood is as close to the 90s as I've seen.
I was going to say, you take their cell phones away, it's basically the 90s up here,
right? Which is great. We know our neighbors. We trust folks to a degree. There are of course limits, but back then you wouldn't think about it. I wouldn't see my parents for a whole day. I would go outside, go tons of different places without telling them, and then just come back to eat.
Legitimately, my parents, first off, my dad had no idea where I was at ever. My mom would have a general idea of like 3 or 4 places I could be, but sometimes I would go meet up with a friend, and then we would just like, we would go ride bikes throughout town. We could be all over the town of Jellicoe. So it was just crazy.
And you're right. Life was like that at this time, but we were also starting to see some child abductions that were hitting really big in the news. A lot of people remember Faces Kids on milk cartons. Missing kids' faces were on there. There were all kinds of public announcements, and there were some big names out there. Adam Walsh, the son of John Walsh from America's Most Wanted, disappeared in 1981. It led to a lot of changes in how law enforcement handles missing child cases. We've covered Amy Mahalovic, who disappeared in 1989, and she was lured from a shopping center in broad daylight. So there are a ton of these cases. And in the early to mid 90s, the news was out and parents were starting to be more strict and be more aware, which, at the time it was stranger danger, right? Don't talk to strangers, which unfortunately drove many kids into the arms of predators that they knew.
Do you remember like your parents starting to have any of those conversations with you?
I don't. because I lived so far back in the woods that there were never strangers in our community.
Right.
If you were there, everybody knew you were there.
That's kind of how it was where I was at too. Like everybody knew everybody, but that also meant we knew like, okay, if you see this guy, try to get on the other side of the street. And I don't know that my parents ever had that conversation with me, but even as like a 12, 13-year-old boy, it was just intuitive. Like, oh, if you see Randy coming, to be clear, there's nobody named
I was going to say, it's Randy in your community.
No, it was just an example. Like, but we had just a few people that you knew there was a few screws loose, and you didn't, if you saw them coming, you went out of your way to avoid them.
Yeah, they were unpredictable. They were not necessarily safe. People started locking their doors a little earlier in the evening around this time. They told their kids not to talk to anybody they didn't know. There were commercials on TV at 10 o'clock that said, do you know where your children are? So that people were reminded to check on their kids.
We were basically being neglected.
Pretty much.
But really, we were just being taught to be independent.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to approach it.
Yeah, I'm totally all in on that.
Let's talk a little bit more about Tawnya to understand who she was. So she was born and raised in Spring Hill, Kansas. Again, she was a freshman at Spring Hill High School, 1996, and she was starting to navigate those exciting / awkward teenage years of bouncing classes, friendships, drama, growing independence, and then, just trying to be a good student in high school. And her family would describe her as kind, thoughtful, gentle-spirited. She wasn't necessarily the loudest in the room, but she was the kind of person that people liked being around. Teachers were able to notice that she was very creative, and her friends thought she was a very loyal friend. And in a small town like Spring Hill, you don't just go to school with someone, you grew up alongside them. Like, you know these people from the time that you're like in preschool with each other, and sometimes even before that. You were engaged in their everyday life. You saw them at birthday parties. You saw them at church, little league games. Like, the small towns, communities, it's amazing. If you've never experienced that, everybody knows everybody.
And that's exactly the type of place that Spring Hill was. About 35 miles south of Kansas City. Had that small town feel. Friday night football games were where everybody went every Friday night. Neighbors watched out for each other's kids, and crime was pretty rare. So when it happened, it made a big impact. Everybody knew, even if there was a petty theft at a grocery store, if there was a fight after a ball game, everybody knew what was happening. That sense of safety was part of what made Tanya's story so shocking. She wasn't wandering out in a dangerous area she shouldn't be in. She wasn't hanging out with people she shouldn't have been with. She was just a teenager taking a short walk that she had taken many, many times home from a friend's house, which, I don't know, that's a great time for reflection, for calming down. Like, those walks home to see my friends back home, they were great.
I love listening to like podcasts and music when I'm taking a walk, but sometimes I need to go back to those old days where I didn't have any distractions.
The sounds of nature and your own mind.
So this was something they let her do all the time. So this night in particular, she was going to be walking back from her friend's house, and they expected her back for dinner, which is like my life growing up. But when she didn't make it home, it wasn't a missed curfew. It was an alarm bell. Like, this was not something that she would do because she had done it countless times before, and her parents trusted her to be back when she said she would be back. So that evening, again, December 7th, 1996, Tawnya had gone to visit a friend only a few blocks away from her home. It was a wintry night where the air felt kind of cold and sharp. Around 6 p.m., she said goodbye to her friend and started walking home, and is a route that she knew very well. And it shouldn't have taken her more than 10 minutes, but something went wrong during that walk. So what happened, man?
Yeah, she didn't show up, so her parents started getting worried immediately. They did know when to expect her. She wasn't there, so they knew that she was a responsible young lady that would call if she knew she was going to be late. So this was very out of character, and around midnight, they started calling around, calling her friends, calling places that she would hang out. They finally called police to see if they could file a missing persons report or if they could just go around looking for her. They just wanted help finding their little girl. And the process for missing teens back then wasn't what it is now. There was not necessarily an automatic Amber Alert. There weren't social media posts that went out and went viral immediately. Now, there was still in many places a tendency to think, well, maybe they ran away or they're just hiding from their parents and we just need to wait a little while. But in this case, officers took it extremely seriously and they immediately went out looking for Tawnya, trying to retrace her route and talk to neighbors and see what they could find out.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the weather was a little bit of a factor. So that evening, snow was falling, and if you're familiar with Kansas, like snow can fall pretty quick. So this was the kind that would blanket the ground really quickly, which made it almost impossible to find any footprints or tire tracks because the snow would have filled them in really soon after they were made. So critical evidence matters. And in this particular situation, it was almost impossible to see where her footprints were because of the snow. Now, search teams continued to work into the early hours, but again, the cold and darkness made it very difficult. K-9 units were brought in. Volunteers would walk fields and wooded areas with flashlights, and police followed up on every lead they could find, but there was no sign of Tawnya. There was no discarded clothing, no personal items left along the route, nothing they could find to indicate where she might have gone, or most importantly, who she would have been with.
And that's the thing, right? Like, she was coming from a friend's house. They knew the route, but nobody on the route saw her or saw what happened. And there are so many opportunities for hope for them to say, well, let's go to this house. Surely they saw something. Let's call this person. I know she would have checked in there, probably stopped by on her way home, but nothing panned out. By the next morning, her disappearance was front page news all around the area. Parents were holding their kids closer. Conversations around tables shifted from holiday plans to talking about Tawnya, the missing girl. The fear was real and it was immediate. It was, a reminder that bad things can happen in our town, which is always what we try to forget or try not to think about, at least. But as the hours turned into days, her disappearance got more and more mysterious. It was as if she had vanished out of thin air. When we get back, we'll talk about the investigation and what they did find out about those early morning hours when Tawnya went missing.
Cash flow crunch? OnDeck's small business line of credit gives your business immediate access to funds up to $100,000 right when you need it. Cover seasonal dips, manage payroll, restock inventory, or tackle unexpected expenses without missing a beat. With flexible draws, transparent pricing, and control over repayment, get funded quickly and confidently. Apply today at OnDeck.com. Funds could be available as soon as tomorrow. Depending on certain loan attributes, your business loan may be issued by OnDeck or Celtic Bank. OnDeck does not lend in North Dakota. All loans and amounts subject to lender approval.
Confronting high credit card debt can feel scary. But the good news is if you owe $10,000 or more in credit card debt, financial relief options are now available. National Debt Relief is currently offering debt relief designed to reduce what you owe, fast-tracking your way to being debt-free. If you qualify for debt relief, you may be able to pay back significantly less than what you owe and save thousands of dollars. Imagine only paying one low monthly program payment you can afford and saving money as you become debt-free. National Debt Relief has already helped bring debt relief to over 550,000 U.S. consumers, earning thousands of 5-star reviews and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. You're stronger than your credit card debt. Take the first step and visit nationaldebtrelief.com to see what debt relief you may qualify for. That's nationaldebtrelief.com.
We often have some negative things to say about investigations when things don't go as planned, but here the Johnson County Sheriff's Office treated Tanya's disappearance as if it was a true emergency right from the bat. They didn't wait the mandatory 24 or 48 hours that often applied to missing teens in the 90s. They realized that something was wrong. However, their initial search came up short. They were asking everybody if they'd seen a teenage girl in a dark jacket and jeans heading toward where the Knights lived. The last person to see her alive was her friend when she left her house. And again, this is a short distance. You talk about a 10-minute walk. That's probably a half mile or less. You can see that far normally. But it was like she just disappeared.
I talk a lot about Occam's razor to my children. Like, the simplest solution is often the answer. Like, if they lose something, I'm like, well, let's look in the places that we know it could be, right? And that's what police did. They wanted to make sure that she hadn't slipped away and was actually running away, or if there was some secret, like a boyfriend or a bully at school, they had to check everything. So police went to a lot of her friends' houses and were asking, was there trouble at school? Was there a secret that she was holding on to? Was there something at home that we're not sure about? Because maybe she did run away, but everything they were asking was coming up empty. There was no bully. There was no boyfriends that were trouble. There was no secret that she was keeping. It seemed like this then was leaning towards the worst case possibility, and that was that somebody had taken her that they did not know. This was a very likely abduction situation, and it's really just, I don't know, cold and full of evil to think about somebody just coming in and that you don't know and taking your sweet kid away. But that seems like what's happening here. Statistically, when a teenage girl disappears without warning, there's no sign of voluntary departure. Abduction is really high on that list.
In 1996, again, they were working on limited information with limited media. They were considering the cases that had been national headlines before. Maybe there had been some best practices established. Maybe some common failures had shown up and they would know what to do. Just a few months before this, 17-year-old Angie Dodge had been murdered in Idaho Falls. 2 years before that, in 1994, Amber Hagerman was abducted, leading to the creation of the Amber Alert system. And we've covered the case of Polly Kloss in 1993, that these cases were starting to add up. So I'm afraid as law enforcement, they were thinking this does not always end well. And the parents were probably in the same boat, worried. I see these on the news all the time, and they hardly ever end well.
There were some leads that trickled in, as they often do in cases like this. Some people reported seeing a suspicious car driving slowly through the neighborhood. Other folks called in and said they had saw a man walking near the area where Tawnya would have been on her walk, but none of those tips led to anything solid. I think deputies did a good job in this next part. They actually checked with the registered sex offenders in the area, which was a standard procedure, and that's good to hear. But this was before the widespread online sex offender registry that exists now. In 1996, much of that information was still locked in like paper files or in some obscure like DOS database system. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say DOS, just think of the most primitive computer system you can imagine, and then imagine it being a lot worse. And that's what I'm talking about
like
here.
the screens from the Matrix, just green letters that seem to make no sense.
So this was not an easy thing to do, and it relied on officers in one jurisdiction sharing information with them. Like if they had an offender that moved out of their town, did they communicate that effectively to the next town? It meant a lot of phone calls, faxes, and even in-person interviews. Family and friends did not sit on the sidelines either. They organized their own search parties. They posted flyers. They talked to local media. Tanya's photo was shared on TV, newspapers, with anybody they could, and it saw her smiling with that unmistakable spark of that she always had, and it was everywhere. People knew she was missing. It was taped in convenience store windows, bulletin boards in the area, at grocery stores, even on church doors. Local news outlets kept her story alive. They interviewed her parents. They were pleading with the public to keep looking. And in a small town, the kind of community where she was, it is a double-edged sword. It can help bring in tips, but it also fuels rumors. You and I, we know how the rumor mills in small towns can be, and it's almost relentless is how I would describe that. anyone who works in true crime knows that rumors can send an investigation into circles. You can be chasing leads that aren't actually real, and that was beginning to happen here for Tawnya.
Yeah, people calling in false tips and feeding off of rumors, and even officers getting kind of locked into rumors and getting tunnel vision. So they certainly do not help, but that was a problem here. Thus, they went months without any kind of news, without any kind of break. They followed up on all leads, but they led nowhere. And then on June 7th of 1997, about 6 months after she had disappeared, the remains of a young girl, the skeletal remains, were discovered in a farmer's field in the 21,000 block of Highway 169 in Spring Hill, Kansas. The location of the body gave some indicators and clues to authorities about how this body had gotten there, and it would later be confirmed to be the body of Tawnya Knight. It was just a few miles from where she was last seen, in an area not heavily traveled in winter, so this wouldn't have been on her normal route. Whoever left her there had to know the back roads. They had to know the fields well enough to be able to get into this field to dispose of the body and to leave without being seen. So that suggests that it could have been somebody local, somebody that was at least familiar with the area. So maybe somebody that used to live around here, somebody that's new to the area but learning. So it had much less of the evidence that would appear that somebody was just passing through and happened to do this. But now they had confirmation that Tawnya had been killed, and all the hope of finding her alive was gone. So the motivation turned to finding out what happened and who did it.
Well, and you mentioned that this was a remote area that was accessible via back roads. So it almost suggests that the killer knew the area, which really sucks, especially in a small town, because that means when you go into a store and you've already thought somebody was kind of shady anyway, people begin looking at each other a little different, right? This is the killer could be your neighbor. It could be a coworker, someone that you waved to at the grocery store. So there was an intense fear in the community, but also the pressure on law enforcement to find the person responsible was almost crushing. So, of course, this then turned into a homicide investigation. Detectives had to almost rework the case, going and mapping out her last known movements, re-interviewing witnesses, collecting any physical evidence that was there at the scene. So once Tanya's body was recovered, the Johnson County Sheriff's Office knew that they had a very different kind of challenge. This was something that they probably didn't face a lot, right? In those small towns, this is very rare.
It was a lot of uncertainty on their part. It's not that they hadn't sought out training, but they weren't solving murders every day, right? And there was a lot of pressure on them to make something happen here. These cases had tended to go 1990s viral. And by that, I mean just kind of cover the entire country. So these had tended to blow up in the media, and they didn't want to be one of the other police departments that couldn't solve one of these cases. But they also didn't want to rush to try to solve it because they were afraid that they would miss out on evidence. So they were trying to balance urgency and pressure with being thorough. And they also didn't want to mess evidence up that would compromise the case if they solved it and it ever got to court. Detectives were working around the clock. They worked on a victimology profile, basically putting together a complete picture of Tawnya, everybody in it, and then looking for individuals that may have had both access to her, knowledge of her, or have sought the type that she fit as far as her profile goes. Where she went, who she knew, her routines, her likes, her dislikes were all part of this. And that helped to narrow down the pool of suspects in hopes of identifying somebody who had the motive and opportunity to do something here. They looked really closely at the crime scene, and the field where her body was found didn't give a lot of evidence, but it did give one key detail. This meant that the killer did have access to a vehicle, because she couldn't have been taken there without that, wouldn't have had access to it. They knew the area well enough to know that this was a place that wouldn't get any attention, and it could be a while before the body was found. This is rural Kansas in the dead of winter. You can't just stumble into a spot like that unless you've been there before or unless somebody's told you where to go.
Especially in this kind of weather. I mean, I know they're used to that type of weather more so than we are here, but in a storm coming in like that at night, I mean, it's not easy to navigate. So you would really have to know your way around.
Even if you know the area, it's harder to see. Landmarks are covered in snow. It's tough.
But when she's discovered, it's June, so there's no more snow anywhere. So they are able to see everything that would be at the crime scene if there was anything to be found. So the state crime lab examined the clothing. They actually called in the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. But this was 1996, so DNA testing was still very much in its infancy. And the samples they had were, they were degraded by the snow exposure to the elements. So any results they got would have been minimal compared to what modern technology can do now. So from there, investigators started to kind of go down the usual list of suspects. They were looking at family members, friends, classmates, acquaintances. One theory that quickly emerged was that Tawnya's killer might be a local predator who had gone undetected for years. So the 1980s and 90s saw several high-profile cases of serial offenders operating in small towns, sometimes for decades before they were finally caught. In fact, some investigators have looked at cases like BTK in Wichita as an example of how someone can live an apparently ordinary life while also committing these horrific crimes at night. Another possibility was a crime of opportunity. Maybe somebody saw Tawnya walking alone that night and decided to act. In rural areas, it's not uncommon for people to stop their cars to talk to pedestrians, but in this case, that moment could have turned deadly.
And it was cold, obviously. Maybe they offered her a ride and she thought, it's so cold that I need to say yes to this. Who knows how she was actually captured. Over the years, there have been persons of interest in Tawnya's case. The sheriff's office has never publicly named a person, but they have acknowledged that multiple people have been looked at very closely, interviewed, investigated, even tested against some of the forensic evidence. Some of the leads came from tips that were called in because a lot of the great media coverage of the case. Others came from inmates, people in jail who claim to have information. I tend to take everything that prison snitches say with a grain of salt. But as often the case, most of these leads ended up fizzling out. Either alibi is held up, there was no physical evidence, there was no opportunity for this individual, and without something concrete, which fingernails, a confession, something of Tanya's found at their house, something like that, there was really nothing that she could move forward in. Another theory that's come about over the years is that Tawnya could be connected to other unsolved homicides in the region. Law enforcement's never confirmed this publicly, but there's similarities between her case and a handful of others in Kansas and neighboring states during the 90s. Those cases involved young female victims, abductions near their homes, then the bodies found in rural areas. But that's where the difficulty comes, right? Like, you have these similarities, but that doesn't mean they're identical. And without direct evidence linking them, it's speculation. And how much time do you waste assuming they are of the same person if they end up being not? That's kind of the balance of being a detective, right? Like, what leads are worth me following? What do I need to keep focused on? And because sometimes a small break can bust a whole case wide open. But if you spend too much of your time in the wrong places, then you may miss it. So unfortunately, some of this is instinct and some of it ends up being luck.
Yeah. And I don't know that we have anything else to go on publicly. I think, this is still very much an active investigation. I say that. I don't know how active it is right now, but it is an ongoing and open investigation. Police authorities have said that they've ran the samples they do have through modern technology. And as far as the public is aware, we don't have anything concrete. There's no, as far as I can find, there's no like primary suspect or theory that they have. It really seems like this is just one of those cases that's going to be open forever. And unless detectives or police have more than what they're telling the public, then I really worry this is one that potentially may never be solved.
Yeah, they haven't named anybody. You can go online and find some names that have been thrown out by the community, but we kind of talked about how those rumors don't usually help things. Police have said that they continue to retest evidence with modern methods, with modern technology, and that they'll continue to do so. And they're open to any other leads that come in and are promising. So there are some pieces that they can still test, but who's to say that the individuals that committed this crime were ever caught for anything and their DNA would be accessible? I know genetic genealogy can provide some help for that, but otherwise, I think you're right. I think it is going to take somebody's genealogy being tested against some of the material, or it's going to take a deathbed confession or even another confession that is corroborated by evidence. Because at this point, I don't know, like we covered Henry Lee Lucas recently, it's hard to trust the word of somebody who is a lifelong criminal.
Well, and I wonder if potentially the person that is responsible has already been apprehended for something similar, and maybe they just haven't uncovered the full extent of what they've done that led them to be incarcerated. I think it's either that or the person that has done this is deceased, but I don't think that this is just like this is so sinister. It's not just a one-time thing. You know, I think this was somebody who did this serially and may or may not have been caught or is already deceased by some other means, but that's kind of my perspective, and I have no expertise to say that other than my gut.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's an uphill battle regardless. I do think there is the chance of it being solved, and I think if you're her family, you have to maintain that hope in modern technology and modern leads and in, the popularity of true crime right now. There may be people that hear this story through our podcast or others or a special on TV that say, you know what, my relative lived in the area at that time. Let's see what they know. And you may be able to go back and track some people who maybe should have been persons of interest that weren't. So you hope that somebody's guilt grows heavier with age, or you hope somebody knows something they weren't aware of. So that's part of why we do this, right? To create this type of awareness for unsolved cases and hope that somebody steps up and tells the truth. But the only person that knows the truth may just be the killer themselves. So I don't know. I'm not optimistic about this one being solved, but I would not rule it out.
Yeah, my gut is telling me this is probably somebody who lives in the area or at least in another smaller town near this area. I don't think this is like a roaring metropolis, right? So I don't think there's a lot of travelers that go through here on purpose. So
yeah, and it didn't seem like a traveler that was involved in this particular crime. So I agree with you. I think it's somebody that at least has a connection to the area. Maybe they visited for business often or visited for a personal connection every now and then. They knew where they were going and they knew what they were looking for, but are they even still in that area? And how can we find out?
Man, this one sucks. I wish that we could sit here and tell you that we know who was responsible for Tawnya's murder. I wish that this family had answers, but none of that is true. But
again, we do this to help spread awareness. This is not a case that I've seen covered in a ton of places. And again, thank you to the 5-star review that came in to recommend this one so that we could dig into it as well. Hopefully somebody does know something and comes forward to share what they know, and we can try to get some justice for Tawnya.
Guys, we appreciate you sticking around. Again, don't forget to check out patreon.com, search True Crime Cast. You can have some bonus episodes that are only available to Patreon members, not available to the general public.
Yeah, that new episode coming out this Friday, and then the first day of every month, we have a brand new episode that comes out on Patreon, and then you get everything else early and ad-free. If you're like me, I hate ads, so it will prevent you from having to open your app up and skip them every time the ads come up like I do. Also, don't skip the ads. I should say that you should take advantage of the sponsors because that's what helps our show, but I also want to make this a great experience for the listeners, and I know what I value, and listening to ads isn't part of that. So Patreon's a great place. Hope to see you all at CrimeCon. Until then, we have a few more cases coming out, so we'll keep you posted on any updates of some things we may be doing there, how to get in touch with us.
Guys, we appreciate you. And until next crime, this has been True Crimecast.
You've listened to True Crimecast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.